Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you're having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled People Story. I still remember the day I moved into my home, full of hope and excitement for the future. The Homeowners Association's agreement promised to take care of any property damage caused by natural occurrences, and the responsibility of maintaining the underlying ground. Living in an area prone to erosion, this assurance gave me a sense of security. My property was slightly elevated with a nearby lake, so I initially believed that maybe, just maybe, this homeowners associations would be different from the horror stories I had heard. The first year passed without incident, but then came a series of heavy rainfall. The signs of trouble began to appear. The land beyond my property started to crumble and collapse into the lake. Although it wasn't directly affecting my land, I alerted the homeowners associations, hoping they would address the issue. However, they remained unresponsive, and the erosion continued. With each subsequent rainfall, the erosion grew worse, encroaching dangerously close to the guardrail the homeowners associations had installed. It became evident that my own property was being neglected, with no ground treatment or maintenance provided. I reached out to the homeowners associations multiple times through letters and phone calls, but all I received were generic replies and empty promises. It was as if my concerns fell on deaf ears. As news of another impending rainstorm reached me, anxiety gripped my heart. I couldn't bear the thought of jeopardizing the safety of my family. Determined to protect them, I took time off work and made the decision to leave for a vacation to visit my parents and explore new sites. But before departing, I sent a final reminder to the homeowners associations about the approaching storm and the lack of care given to my land. Upon returning from our trip, my worst fears were realized. Half of my backyard had vanished, swallowed by the relentless erosion into the lake. The shed, my wife's beloved garden, and even my children's swing set had all been devoured by the voracious waters. Panic washed over me, not only because of the debris that now polluted the lake, but also due to the looming threat that my entire house could be claimed by the relentless erosion. Driven by anger and frustration, I directed my fury at the homeowners associations, holding them accountable for their negligence. This time, I reached out to a lawyer determined to sue the homeowners associations for breaching the terms of our agreement. Suddenly, the homeowners associations was willing to engage in discussions, desperately trying to rectify the situation. They pleaded ignorance regarding the erosion and even argued that erosion did not constitute weather damage, despite its direct correlation. They attempted to offer me a paltry sum of $500, conveniently deducted from next year's membership dues. Their offer was an insult, and I made it clear that I would see them in court. Armed with a comprehensive trail of evidence, including the emails, phone messages, and the contract itself, I confronted the homeowners associations in the legal arena. Their lawyers stumbled through feeble excuses, claiming they were not responsible for my land's well-being, and citing non-existent loopholes. However, my lawyer astutely pointed out the explicit language in the contract, emphasizing the homeowners associations' obligation to provide ground treatment to prevent erosion. It was undeniable proof that they were fully aware of the issue. The homeowners association's feeble attempts to evade responsibility crumbled under scrutiny. They tried to argue that I hadn't followed the correct channels of communication or lacked concrete evidence linking the erosion to the weather. But the judge saw through their feeble defenses and focused solely on the facts presented before him. In the end, justice prevailed. The homeowners associations was found guilty of gross negligence and ordered to pay me a staggering $360,000 in damages. It was a victory not just for me, but for every individual who had fallen victim to the homeowners associations' disregard for their obligations. Rumors began to circulate, exposing the homeowners associations' mismanagement and embezzlement of member dues. The aftermath of my lawsuit led to a wave of similar cases, with more people realizing the homeowners associations' misconduct and fighting back. The next one is a pro-revenge story. As we found out that we would be expecting not one, but 2 kids, we knew we had to move to a real house with more space. At the time, we were still living in a 1-bedroom studio 1 floor up from the ground floor. Its only entrance was a metal fire escape, stairs. Not ideal for a pregnant woman, let alone to live with 2 small babies. So we found a privately leased house that was newly renovated and had all the room and a large garden we were looking for. We signed the lease and immediately collected the keys. As the owner drove off, the woman next door came up to me, immediately demanding that we not make noise before noon as her boyfriend worked nights and slept in, and she had a whole list of other do's and don'ts. Right off the bat, we knew trouble was incoming. Since the house was fully renovated and not much had to be done, we decided not to poke the bear. We would do the things that made noise after noon. We moved in after 2 weeks and the whole street was warm and welcoming. My wife was almost due to give birth to my twin daughters, and some offered help with anything we needed. They were really kind people. They also told us about our neighbors. Nobody liked them. He was a big bully and got into arguments with everybody. They were also known as radio pirates, meaning they illegally broadcasted on the radio with all Dutch bangers. Their parties went on from Thursday to Sunday until 5 in the morning. Loud music, constant yelling, always drunken, etc. It was really something to look forward to when moving in, especially with 2 babies on the way. The partying began immediately, full blast. Quite classy for someone who demanded quiet when the douchebag needed his beauty sleep. Then one day, my father-in-law came to put new grass in. He parked his trailer at the back of our houses, which is public space. Not according to him, though. That exact spot where the trailer, full of grass sods, quite heavy stuff, was parked was his spot, and he demanded that we move the trailer. I wasn't going to do that, as I didn't plan to walk all the way around the house with the sods. He got angry right away and demanded that I move it. I told him to go screw himself. I was done with him already. I'm also a ginger, so besides having no soul, I do have a temper, which is always in check until you repeatedly provoke me. Anyone who knows me will tell you that you really had to make an effort for that to happen. We went on working, and at the end of the day, my father-in-law wanted to leave. He hooked up the trailer, and there was the douchebag, telling him off, yelling that it was his spot and he better not do it again or else. Mess with me all you want, I can handle it. But what you don't do is threaten my family. I ran outside and told him in no uncertain terms to back off or he'd be the sorry one. Total bluff on my side? Yes, I have that temper, but I'm not impressively built and have no hidden fighting skills. I do fight dirty. He backed off, my father-in-law left, and I went inside where I found my wife crying. She was scared that he might do something to her father or me, and we didn't need that right now. Combined with hormones from being pregnant, you can imagine the picture. I was even more pissed off, but had to promise not to act on anything. I won't, dear. Not yet, anyway. Time went on without any real incidents, and then the time came when my wife went into labor. It didn't go smoothly, and she ended up having to deliver via C-section because our second daughter was almost strangled by the umbilical cord. We had to stay 3 nights, and they were excruciating nights for a lot of reasons. Finally, we got to go home, and our family had put a giant sign in our front yard welcoming the babies. The sign had already been up for a few days prior to our return, so our friendly neighbors definitely knew about it. But did they give a flying duck? No, they did not. From the first night on, they started partying and blasting their terrible music. They started at noon and continued until 5 or 6 in the morning. Classy. They kept it up for days, so it wasn't just Thursday to Sunday. It was all week long and into the next. We were broken, hardly slept. One of our daughters suffered from heavy cramps combined with all the noise, and her parents were at the end of their wits, so she cried a lot. And then I had just had it. I researched some things about radio pirates, the laws and regulations, and his large antenna, 5 meters or more, in his backyard, which was illegal in itself. But he used it to illegally broadcast on the radio, which meant he had a lot of equipment to do so, which was even more illegal, and could even get him jailed. At the very least, they could seize it all and fine him big time, somewhere in the range of 10,000 to 45,000 euros. Now, I didn't immediately turn him in, but instead looked for another house to lease first. This was because I figured it wouldn't sit well with him, and having a wife and 2 babies alone in the house during the day while I had to go to work was risky. I hear you guys thinking, why not involve the police? Well, they are utterly useless in cases like this. We called once, and what they did disturbs me to this day. They rang their doorbell and immediately started off by saying we called them about noise complaints. Yes, you read that right. No protection or anything. Just blatantly told them we were the reason they were there, told them to keep it down. And that was it. They didn't even follow up with us or anything. As you can guess, the douchebag was even more pissed off and told me the next day, or yelled over the fence that separates our backyards, that I really should not do that again. It was a threat yet again of which I told the police. I didn't report it the first time as I chalked it up to alpha male behavior and the heat of the moment. But without witnesses to corroborate, nothing could be done yet again. Some days later, I walked out the front door and he just stepped out of his car. He came up to me demanding that I cut back some of our ivy that grew on our side of the fence because it was tangled with his big-ass antenna. He said he would be gone for a few hours, and I could come into his garden to cut back the ivy that had grown through to their side. And then a light bulb went off in my head. I told him politely that I would do that immediately. Why? Because that gave me the opportunity to find out the make and model of his antenna to ascertain its signal strength, where the cables went exactly and what kind of cables they were. I also wanted to get a good view of the equipment he had through the window so I could take some photographs of it. This was the icing on the cake. Meanwhile, we had managed to find a new home, and we had already signed the lease, so we would be gone in 2 weeks. Luckily, we only had to paint the girls' room and pack up our things to move them to the other house. After I trimmed the ivy and collected my evidence, I went online that night to find out the proper channels to report a broadcast pirate and which entity was tasked with catching said pirate. It turned out I had to call the telecom agency, but also the police. I wasn't too happy about involving the police, but I remembered I have a nephew who works for the police. Officially, his area was immigration, but he knew enough colleagues who could help us and whom we could trust not to confront them again, saying I was the one who sent them. That was extremely important for our safety in doing what I was about to do, so I gave both the agency and the police all the evidence I had collected and pointed them to the frequencies he pirated so they could listen in. Then they started a neighborhood investigation, which wasn't really necessary. But we wanted to cover our bases and make it look like he got caught by accident, because they had an active investigation in our area. You never know what he could learn from legal documents and such. We asked them to wait with the raid. Yes, they raid pirate houses, preferably in the early hours of the day when he's asleep, rendering him incapable of fleeing or hiding evidence, etc. We moved 2 weeks later, and they raided his house 2 days after we moved. All of his equipment, computers, radios, cell phones, and his car were seized. He left in handcuffs, and his wife-girlfriend did too for making a big scene and trying to interfere. All of this was live, reported to me by one of my former neighbors who were equally ecstatic about this. It turned out this wasn't the first time he got caught, but his third time. His car had no insurance, and it failed its MOT. This would normally have no significant consequences because he didn't drive it while it was raided. But they had been surveilling him for a week and saw him driving it without insurance and a valid MOT. He was fined somewhere around 30,000 euros, went to jail for 12 weeks, and everything that was seized was destroyed except the car. His girlfriend had to do 40 or so hours of community service. They had to sell the house, which made the other neighbors very happy as they were also done with them. Like I said, I do fight, but very dirty. You really have to make an effort to push me to that point. They did, and they suffered. Over a year later, while shopping for groceries, I encountered them. They gave me the foulest looks. If looks could kill, I'd be a smoldering heap of ash. But it ended there, nothing more than that. Wow, folks. I'm kind of surprised by all the appreciation. Gold and silver awards, wholesome, masterpiece, helpful, bravo grande, and so many upvotes. Thank you all, kind people. I honestly don't know what I can do with gold or silver, but I promise you I'll spend it by giving back. This difficult period in our lives has turned into something better this way. The next one is a petty revenge story. Neighbor's son, Garth, graduated from college about this time last year and got his first full-time career job at a company. He's in the IT department of a branch office and handles IT tasks. The total number of employees at this office is around 20, with some in sales and others working in the office. Karen is the office manager. When Garth first started, there were 3 IT people who had an office in the basement, away from the rest of the employees. This arrangement suited Garth just fine. He's a quiet, introverted young man. He's highly intelligent, but not very social, preferring to spend his time off gaming rather than engaging in live interactions. As you can imagine, he's not a big guy, maybe $1.50 after eating a big steak for dinner. The other 2 IT people eventually moved on to other jobs, but the company didn't replace them. Now Garth has 3 times the workload without receiving a raise. Garth voiced his concerns about the workload and call-outs to Karen, but he received the standard feeble corporate responses and a condescending lecture. I don't know why he didn't quit then, but he stuck it out, hoping to eventually be recognized for his worth, etc. Whenever I spoke with him, he would mention how bad it was working for Karen, but his saving grace was that he was in his solitary office most of the day and didn't have to have much contact with her. Until one day back in February when he received a phone call from Karen telling him to come upstairs. Upon arriving, he was directed to start moving furniture around. Garth took a look around and told Karen that his job does not involve moving heavy objects. Karen got loud and questioned his manhood in front of everyone, but Garth didn't budge. Life changed for Garth after that. Karen had decided to make work miserable for him. She started repeatedly writing him up for whatever she could think of. Here comes the petty revenge. Garth started snooping and discovered that Karen is having an affair with a married co-worker. Their work phones are synced up to the computer system, which Garth has access to. Garth created a mass corporate email with various screenshots of their sexting. He rigged it to be sent out today from her own email account. The beauty of it all, Garth walked in on Friday and tendered his resignation to corporate HR. He left his ID card and whatever else on Karen's desk. Karen made a big deal of shouting at Garth as he was leaving, "Don't let the door hit you in the ass on the way out!" When the email is sent out, they may well suspect that Garth was the perpetrator, but they'll never be able to prove it. I can only hope Garth's revenge is sweet and spectacular. The next one is a malicious compliance story. This happened in Sweden about 40 years ago, and even if my memories may be a bit hazy, the gist of the story is absolutely true, even if the details are a bit off. I had bought an old clunker of a car to get to my new job, and when I say clunker, that is being nice. It was mainly held together by gaffa tape, and it cost me a whopping $100. Kind of temporary until I got my first paycheck. On my way home, one of the few police cars in my small town, approximately 25K, pulled me over, which was indeed understandable as it was around midnight and the car being what it was. But it was actually roadworthy, and their issue was with the road tax. They said it was unpaid and that it was illegal to drive the car. However, they knew who I was because my dad was the district court judge, so they allowed me to drive home while following me, so I'd actually go home, I guess. I complied, of course. When I parked outside our house, they said they had to take the plates off the car, and that I could pay the tax the next day, go to the station, show the receipt, and get the plates back. Fine, I said. They started rummaging in the trunk of their car, and discovered someone had pilfered their toolbox. I offered them to take the keys instead, but nah. They asked if I had a screwdriver in my car, and I said no, had just bought it. I started to talk about other options, but the boss cop told me to just go sit in the car and stay quiet. Not another word from you, little missy kind of attitude. I complied, of course. I was just about to say I could fetch a screwdriver from the tool shed, but they weren't interested in that. I do think they were worried that I'd wake the judge. Oh, horror. Or not. So they opted to call the one other car they had roaming the town that night. A K-9 unit. And that got noisy. We lived near the park, so of course those cops figured it was an opportunity to let the dogs stretch their legs. Sigh. Well, I obeyed orders, sat there, was quiet. They were not. First, my father came out in his robe and slippers, looking slightly frazzled and confused. Not exactly someone to be afraid of, but I just sat there as instructed, because I knew what would come next. My mother, "What are you doing with my daughter?" Well, it went downhill from there. Don't think my dad said a word, but my mom certainly ripped them a new one, and got kind of famous on our street the next few days. Could have been a very quiet and nice interaction here, but, well, they wanted to make a big deal about the missing tax payment, so a big deal they got, for 10 cents, simple typo. The next one is an entitled People Story. Something bizarre happened to me yesterday. I was pulling into a parking lot when the car in front of me suddenly came to a complete stop in the middle of the lane. Its owner, an older white man, turned it off, got out, and started walking into the nearest store in the strip mall. He just parked his car in the middle of the lane. I could have gotten around it if I really tried, but it would be dangerously close to either his car or other parked cars. I lightly tapped my horn twice at him, seeing as how I was essentially stuck now. He turned around and I rolled my window down and said to him, "That's not a parking space." He dramatically pointed at my car and then did this right this way motion with both hands, sort of aiming at the very narrow path that I guess he thought I should be able to get through. I repeated myself again, "Sir, that's not a parking space. I can't get around you." Him, "Why is it that one of you people every time, just go around?" "So he's done this before?" Me, "Sir, what are you doing? That's not a parking space. I need you to move." Him, "I need you to mind your own business." Me, "Come on, you can't park there. Please just move your car." At this point, his lips were doing that weird shake that old people do when they hang their mouths open. I guess he thought he was being intimidating. He stepped up to my window and yelled, "Him, you want to make me?" Okay, so he's done this before and he's being an aggressive jerk? Now I've read on here where other people have interacted with older Karens, and there's apparently a card that you can play that bypasses this sort of attitude. Me. Sir, are you okay? Do you know where you are? Him. What? Me. Are you with someone? Is there someone who's supposed to be helping you today? Him. What are you? Me. Do you need help? It sounds like you don't know where you are, and I'm worried for you. Is there anyone I can call for you to help you? I think he caught on to me at this point, because he switched back from confused to being angry again. Him. I don't know. Is there anyone I can call for you? Is that somehow a threat? I don't, Tico. Me. Sir, it's okay, don't worry. You just stay right there and I'll call someone who can come help you. Don't worry, it'll be okay. Just don't move and I'll call for an ambulance. At this point, I backed into a parking space that had opened behind me and pulled out my phone. I really was going to call cops, but only because he was too confrontational to be left unattended in public. Of course, as with most bullies, the moment they realize they don't have power over you, he gave up, muttered something, got back in his car, and left. On my way out of the lot, I saw that he had miraculously found his way into a parking spot on the other side of the lot. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already.